Welcome everyone to another coffee tasting. I'm your host Aaron Taylor, and today we are tasting another small lot coffee. And then this one comes from a small batch roasters as well. And so these roasters, they're based out of Oregon, and they are supplying their coffee to smaller coffee shops. So today we are exploring another local coffee shop here in downtown Palm Springs. This one is called Cafe La Jefa. So this one is a really cool coffee shop. Has a really nice artsy vibe on the inside, and has a really artsy patio as well. Got a whole lot going on, lots of colors, really cool. Um, we got some pictures on our Instagram showing off what this coffee shop has to offer in terms of the vibe and the atmosphere that it provides. Super cool. So with this coffee is Colombia Aponte. It is going to be a medium roast, and we're getting notes of cantaloupe and a caramelized sweetness. So with this coffee, this is actually a different coffee than what we normally get, and that's because it is a honey process. And so we're going to talk a little bit about the process that this coffee goes through when it's being dried, and how that affects the flavor that we're getting with those cantaloupe notes. For those of you guys joining for the first time, welcome to the live stream. For those of you guys who are returning, welcome back. It is an honor to have you guys back. If you guys haven't had that chance to hit that like and subscribe button, hit the like and subscribe button down below. That really allows me to help build and create this channel that much better. So thank you so much, you guys. With the brew method that we're doing here today, we are doing a pour over, French press, and a Chemex. And with these different brew methods, we're going to get different flavors depending on how the amount of oils and sediments that we get in our coffee. So with the French press, we're gonna get most of those oils and sediments. So we're gonna get a more of an impact flavor of the coffee. With the pour over, we're gonna get more of the oils and less sediments. And with the Chemex, we're getting less oils and less sediments, giving a more balanced cup of coffee. All right. So when you're brewing a pour over, you want to make sure you pour a little bit over all the grinds and then stop and then let your coffee bloom. That's allowing the air to rise to the top so you're not creating a barrier at the bottom, preventing the brew process, causing it to overbrew. And what that does is it impacts the flavor of your coffee, causing it to be either too bitter or too acidic, depending on the flavor notes of the coffee. So with this coffee, because we have the honey process, we're going to get much more of those lighter notes in this particular cup. And the reason why we're getting lighter notes is because we have something going on during the honey process that creates sweeter, more fruity flavors, and that's where that cantaloupe is coming in. Got a perfect bloom on this Chemex going on right now. It's really nice. Just from the smell of the brew, you guys, it's a very mellow flavor. Smells really good. We're definitely getting those fruity cantaloupe notes. And then we're also getting those sweet caramel notes as well. Excellent. All right. So while we wait for those guys to finish, let's go ahead and plunge our French press. So, for this particular cup of coffee, I think I'm gonna like the French press a lot more than the rest of them, just because with this, the reason for the way that this coffee is processed, we're going to get more of those bright citrusy notes, and that's where the cantaloupe flavors are coming in. And with the pour over, those bright citrus cantaloupe notes are really, really going to come forward. And so I tend to lean away from those flavors. And so with the French press, we're going to get a lot more of those caramel, nutty notes. So I'm looking more forward to the French press on this particular cup of coffee. Excellent. Okay. So I don't think I let my pour over bloom properly, you guys. Like I mean, it did bloom a little bit, but I don't think it bloomed enough because it took a lot longer than I think it should have. So we might have overbrewed our pour over coffee. And so that's important. You want to make sure that you brew your coffee correctly because making sure you brew your coffee correctly makes sure that you get those flavors that you're supposed to get from that particular cup. And that's important because the farmers who grow this coffee, they go through a lot of work to make this coffee and they go through a lot of work to get those flavor notes. They dedicate their livelihoods and their work to coming out with these new methods and new ways to create these new flavors. And we have to make sure that we brew our coffee correctly to pay tribute to those who grow the coffee and making sure that we actually get the flavor notes that they want us to taste so that we could taste the dedication and the hard work that goes into this coffee. So making sure that you brew your coffee is not just important for a good flavorful cup of coffee, but it's showing dedication and tribute to the people who grow this coffee, show dedication to growing and making sure that you can have a flavorful cup of coffee. And especially with this particular cup, there's a lot more work goes into this particular bean. Ooh, wow. Oh, that's sweet. So we're getting those super bright fruity flavors with an intense caramely sweetness at the end. You're left with like this almost sweet bitter flavor at the end, but at the very first sip, you're just overwhelmed with bright citrus fruity flavors, and it's definitely got that cantaloupe flavor. Like a lot of the times when you see cantaloupe or strawberry and stuff like that, you tend to associate it with just like the citrus levels. But this has like a true uh fruity, honey, sweet flavor. And that is very, very good. Very bright. Surprising. Very surprising. All right. So now we're gonna try the Chemex. With the Chemex, we're going to get the same with the sediment levels, very little sediments, but we're also going to get less oils too. So that's going to bring down those bright fruity flavors that we got from the pour over, and is going to bring out some more of those caramel bitter notes that we get towards the end. And so it's going to give it a more balanced flavor. Wow. That is really good. It's almost syrupy. Okay, so with the Chemex on this particular cup of coffee, we're getting that intense fruit flavor, but it's not nearly as bright as it is on the pour over. But we still have that intense fruit bite, and that's that cantaloupe flavor that we're getting. And then we're getting that mouthwash, that intense mouthwash feeling of that caramely sweetness, and it's they balance out really well, and it's a very interesting cup of coffee. I like it a lot. That is wild. It definitely has that fruit flavor rather than a coffee flavor, which is very intense. Very wild. All right, so now we're going to try the French press. With the French press, it's going to be very similar to the Chemex, but the flavors are going to be much more intense because we're getting more oils and more sediments in our cup of coffee. So immediately right off the bat, we're getting the same flavor notes that we did from the Chemex, but they're just wafting up a little bit more easily. We get a lot of those cantaloupe notes that we taste, and then we have that subtle caramel sweetness as well from the aromas. And that's just from the aromas. Ooh, that one's still very hot. Oh yeah. So as we let it wash over the tongue, we get those super intense bright fruity flavors, and then we get that super strong caramely sweetness towards the end. And then with the French press is slightly different than the Chemex because with the French press we're definitely getting those lingering caramel bitter flavors. So the those fruit flavors have really washed away. We are getting a little bit of bright citrusy notes on the tongue, but the mainly leftover flavor for this one is definitely the caramel notes. That is a really, really good cup of coffee. Very complex. We got a lot of flavor notes going on, especially with those intense bright notes that you don't normally see in a cup of coffee. And so we're going to explain why we see those intense notes that we do in this cup of coffee here in just a moment. Excellent. That is really, really good. If I had to choose my favorite cup of coffee, you guys, for this one, I would definitely say the Chemex for sure, 100%, just because it really highlights those cantaloupe notes, really brings it forward. With the pour over, we do get a lot of those cantaloupe notes, but it's a little bit too intense. In the flavor, we're getting too much of those bright citrusy notes, and so it kind of takes away from the cup. So with the Chemex, we're getting a little bit more of a balance. We get that strong cantaloupe bite at the very beginning, but then it's kind of washed away and then kind of sits next to this caramely sweetness. So you get like this fruity flavor with a caramely sweet wash, and it's really really pleasant cup of coffee. I would definitely go for the Chemex. The French press is going to be very similar to the Chemex, except we get a little bit more of those caramel notes towards the end, and it you get like right now as I'm talking to you guys, I still have those bitters on the center of my tongue from the French press. While with the Chemex had washed away pretty quickly. So with the Chemex, we're getting a clean cup of coffee, washes away really fast, and then we get those nice subtle cantaloupe bite at the very beginning with a caramel sweetness wash. So I would definitely recommend the Chemex, you guys. So with this cup of coffee, what gives it the cantaloupe sweetness is the fact that it is a honey process. And the honey process is going to be different than the different processes that we see that normal the normal washing process that we're used to. So normally there is the sun dry method, the semi-wash, and the fully wash. And so with the honey process, what's happening is they actually strip the cherry of the pulp, but they leave the layer around the seed um, that protects it from the moisture. And so think of it kind of like when you open up a peanut, and then after you take the peanut shell off the peanut kind of has that like paper skin. That's what they're leaving on this cherry is the paper skin, and that's what protects it from the moisture of the cherry. And what they do is they let that dry on there, and the paper skin and whatever pulp that's left attached to it starts to brown, kind of like an apple sitting out. It starts to form sugars. And so this browning is what's called the honey process, and that's what giving it that sweet, fruity flavor. And so those cantaloupe notes that we're seeing is coming from the honey process, um, that's used to process this coffee. And when I was talking about earlier that this coffee goes through a very intensive processing, is because this requires a lot of work to be able to do a honey processed coffee. You have to make sure that each cherry is properly pulped, and then each bean still has this paper skin on it, and so there's a lot of maintenance involved in this. There's a lot of uh, hand picking and making sure that everything's right. You have to sort through all of it. And so the amount of work that goes into making a honey processed cup of coffee, and especially one as good as this one, is I couldn't even explain how much work that would go into this because it wouldn't be enough. And so that just shows the importance of making sure that we brew this coffee right because of how much work that goes into a honey processed coffee. To improperly brew this coffee would be a waste to such hard work. It's like it's like cleaning an entire facility and then just someone coming in and throwing mud all over it. It's uh you want to make sure that you take care of this coffee. By taking care of this coffee, you want to make sure that you brew it correctly so that you get the flavor notes that they want you to taste. Really, really good, you guys. Honey processed coffee. This is probably one of it's not the first honey processed coffee that I've ever had, but it is the first honey processed coffee that I've ever had that's ever been this sweet. Like, I could actually taste the difference in levels of sweetness with this coffee versus other coffees. Like, literally, like it literally tastes like there might have been fruit added to it, but there's no fruit. It's all flavor and processing. So super cool. With this coffee, it is supplied to us by the Sisters Coffee Company. They're a small roasting company based out of Oregon, and they were founded in 1989. And then they started roasting coffee at a 5 pound batches, and they grew in such popularity with their small batch coffees that after 6 months they were able to buy a larger roasting machine so that they could start roasting more coffee. And they grew so much that to this day they roast over 300,000 pounds a year in their small cabin in Oregon. So it's really cool to be able to highlight this particular company and the fact that they're able to start from scratch in a small cabin in the woods in Oregon and start with 5 pound batches of roasted coffee, and then be able to supply people with gourmet, high quality, single lot coffee, and provide those flavors that we really want to see. So really cool company, you guys. If you guys want to check them out, there will be a link in the description down below for the Sisters Coffee. And then also with this cup of coffee, they supply their coffee to a small business coffee shop in downtown Palm Springs called Cafe La Jefa. If you guys are in Palm Springs, or if you guys are visiting Palm Springs, or you guys plan on going on vacation in Palm Springs, I would recommend definitely hitting up Cafe La Jefa in downtown Palm Springs. Super cool. You can definitely grab yourself a bag of the Sisters Coffee Co. They've got plenty of varieties to choose from, like Rwanda. They also have their special on French roast, other things like that. So definitely give them a shout out. You guys would definitely love the building that they are in. Super cool vibes, very artsy, lots of stuff to look at, lots of colors. Very friendly staff. And the Cafe La Jefa is a business started by a woman. So support those local businesses and support women in the role of leadership. So if you guys are in Palm Springs or if you guys are visiting Palm Springs, I definitely encourage you guys to visit this small coffee shop, Cafe La Jefa, and try their coffee provided by Sisters Coffee Co. And then if you guys get a chance, definitely try the Colombia Aponte, which is a honey processed coffee, which is different than the normal processes that we see in everyday coffee, which gives it a sweeter, brighter flavor notes. Really, really good. With this one, we're getting cantaloupe with a caramelized sweetness. I really like it on the Chemex. Thanks again, everyone, for joining today's coffee tasting. I will see you this Friday as we taste the Odyssey blend by Starbucks, which is a 3-region blend. We're going to explore the different regions that it comes from, and we're going to explore the flavor notes that we get from that particular cup of coffee. So I will see you guys this Friday. Have a great day, and I hope your coffee was delicious.